All right, welcome to RE Visionaries Podcast from MRI Software, where we not only discuss the industry's issues, but we talk about some issues that connect us as a human race. And today, we're going to be talking about something really important, really near and dear to so many people's hearts, and that's mental health and well-being. And just coming out of Mental Health Awareness Month, it's pretty appropriate that we're discussing this subject. And here to tackle that with me today is industry principal from MRI Software, Brian Zrimzik, or as we like to affectionately call him, BZ.
Hey,
BZ,
Cedric.
how are you, sir?
I'm great. Good to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with me. Now, I know you've been in the industry a while, and you're pretty much an industry celebrity at this point. But for those people that don't know you, why don't you why don't you tell them who you are?
Yeah, so I've been in this space. I'm in my 20th year in prop tech, my 10th year as a provider after spending just about 10 years as a client. So and I was in the technology side as a client. So I've been on both sides, like working at a client and then now providing solutions to our clients. So I've seen a lot of change in this industry. 20 years is unfortunately, it's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, when you were growing up, actually when I was growing up, I'm what they call an elderly millennial. I remember times when, I was playing Oregon Trail and all of my family members were dying of dysentery. So,
well, I am at the, I'm an early Gen Xer, but I'm from the Midwest.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm a boomer sometimes, but my parents are boomers. So I can't be in the same generation as my parents. So, but they're early boomers.
So how did you all deal with the topic of mental health when you were growing up? Was this something you all discussed?
No.
Okay.
No. Like there's a lot of bad things that kind of, especially for dudes.
Yeah.
Right. Rub a little dirt on it, get over it, move
Absolutely.
on. You know
Push
what I mean?
through it.
Push through it. Yeah. Unfortunately for me, I have a sunny disposition. So like a lot of things don't get me down.
Yeah.
And my kids, my wife, all have a variety of things they work through from a mental health perspective. And they can commiserate with each other. And I am an absolute foreigner in the conversation because I don't experience life that way, So it's kind of challenging sometimes to be dad when dad doesn't have the answer.
And that's
right?
okay.
And that's okay. It feels bad as dad to not have the answer, but okay, let's get you to someone who can help.
Yeah.
Right. And my wife has better answers than I do because she's lived through this, her whole life. Right.
Yeah.
So she deals with the two. So yeah, it's been, but from and then that's in your personal life and at work, I think it was even more taboo. Right. You just punch the clock, do your job, do a good job, and rinse and repeat. Right. And of course, people would turn to things that maybe weren't all that healthy for them to cope. Right? Whether they would drink or whatever, right? That was happening. I think it's great. COVID, maybe the silver lining in the COVID cloud was it brought some of this stuff to the forefront, especially in this industry, right? In property management. When we talk about our approach to the marketplace, we talk about it in three categories. Take care of residents. That's what we need to do to run our business, right? Take care of business. Accounting and keeping track of everything and being efficient, things like that. And then take care of your staff. So we have those three buckets kind of in our vision. And as a software provider, we really do two of them. We have software that helps people take care of their residents, their customers. We have software that helps them run their business. We don't really have software that helps them take care of their staff. We have software that will provide efficiencies to maybe give time back to the staff, so they can have a little bit less stress. Maybe they can focus a little bit more on the mental health. And we've partnered with NAA the last few years on a mental health survey to help this industry understand where the impacts are. In almost all customer service industries, if you owned a restaurant and I came in and I sat for dinner and you overcooked my steak, I would complain that I ordered it medium and you served it to me well and you must do it again.
Is that your go-to, medium?
Medium, yes. My son's it still has a little moo in it for him,
My mother's that way as well.
So you would fix it, and then you would hope I come back again. Well, in this industry, your customers live in your property. They're coming back. They're living there. They're not leaving. They're coming back. They're there for their lease.
Yeah.
So it's a different dynamic because they're there all the time. And it's also from a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, not to get academic, but shelter is at the foundational level of the pyramid. So people get really stressed when their housing's put at risk, right? And the property staff have to deal with all this. I always say that the life on site is it's a day full of interruptions. You have no idea what's going to walk through the door next. It might be someone who's coming to tour and it's happy because you're trying to lease them and sell them on all the great amenities in the space and the community you have. It might be someone coming in with some complaint about their neighbor, about their unit, about life, and they need someone to talk to, and you're the property manager, you're the person who's in front of them. You have no idea what's going to walk through the door, and you have to deal with all of it. You're like part accountant, part salesperson, part maintenance dispatcher, part counselor, credit counselor, fraud detector. Like there's so many things on the plate for folks these days. And, our industry is unfortunately, there's a lot of turnover, right?
Yeah.
Folks who work on site, especially, half of them only last a year. The other half have very successful careers. They move up from being a leasing consultant to a property manager to a regional manager, and there's some great career paths. But there's a lot of burnout in the space. And like a lot of places post-COVID, finding staff is hard. Finding the right staff is harder, right? And then keeping them. And when you dig into the results of these surveys on mental health, it's really shocking.
Yeah. But before we jump into that, let me just ask you, what do you, considering that we didn't used to talk about it and that there was such a stigma associated with anyone admitting that they had, any sort of mental health challenges, what do you think is different about this generation of people? Why is it so public? I mean, you think about just as recently as a few years ago when Naomi Osaka famously pulled out of one of the tennis tournaments to take care of her mental health. You have so many sports.
Kevin Love from the Cavaliers, same thing, right? Yeah, so I think it's just become more accepted that, physical health and mental health should be viewed like the same thing, right? If I throw my back out and I don't come to work, no one's going to write me up.
So true. Because I did that earlier this year. Well, I turned 40 and was working out and threw my lower back out. When I tell you it was some of the worst pain.
Yeah. So, you're hurt. You didn't come to work.
Yeah.
If you're hurt emotionally and mentally and you need time to recenter yourself, that has to be okay too. Right. And sometimes that's not okay.
Yeah.
And people are more ashamed to explain themselves that I took a mental health day than I pulled out my back. Right. I threw out my back. So I think it's getting better. People are talking about it more. There's more awareness. I know we at MRI, we have a very strong culture around DEIB, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I think people in the past, there's a lot of things about LGBTQ folks. My daughter is LGBTQ. It's easier to be themselves today than it was in my day, right? I came of age in the 80s, right? It wasn't a thing, I have fraternity brothers who I know now are gay, who there was no such conversation back in the day. Like it just, and I don't know how we would have done. We wouldn't have done well. I could just say that, not because we were bad people, but culturally we weren't there yet, right? And I think culturally we're there now. It's Pride Month, right?
Yes, it is.
There's a pride flag flying outside my house.
I love that.
Because my daughter and her partner live in this apartment we have kind of above the garage. And the American flag goes up on Memorial Day, and the pride flag goes up on June 1st. And I'm too lazy to take one down, so I take them all down after Labor Day. They kind of stay up all summer, and neighbors make positive comments so it's been interesting for me to kind of go through that with her because I have to kind of change my frame of reference. And
there's been so much effort around education. regarding belonging and creating these spaces where people feel safe.
Yeah. To be themselves.
To be themselves. Absolutely.
Yes.
And those conversations often start at home, and people experience that at home, right? Because sometimes that's where the biggest challenge has historically been.
Yeah.
Is the feeling of acceptance at home.
Absolutely. You have a choice. I said this on a town hall that we had in the company. You have a choice as a parent when your daughter, your son, whoever comes to you and says, "Dad, I'm gay," or whatever, and you have this value set in your brain that you learned your whole life. You have a choice to make. Your kid, or whatever you thought you should do. And if you don't choose your kid, I feel bad for everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Because those are the folks that struggle the most when they're ostracized by their family, right? So fortunately, my wife was, I like to say, she jumped in off the high dive board. I kind of waded in from the shallow end. It took me a little longer to get there, but I knew where I had to get.
But you got there.
I had to get there. So all that stuff about, I think we're taking some load off of people because they can be them.
Yeah.
Right? There are programs, so many companies have embraced, because we've learned if we embrace all the people as who they are, they're going to be more productive.
That was one of the things,
and that's good for us as a business.
I found really interesting about the survey results. And speaking of, we're at NAA Apartmentalized 2024, so that's why you may hear some background noise, because we're on the trade show floor.
Yes, we are
live from the NAA Apartmentalized trade show floor. But one of the themes that they were talking about was mental health and well-being, and that's that survey that you were talking about.
Yes.
Let's start with sort of the high level results. What was like the big takeaway from the survey that you?
So a couple things. I'm going to look at some notes here. So first of all, we've sponsored the survey with NAA the last couple years. And the company that facilitated the survey used a more academic framework this year, like questions from the DSM-3R and specific questions about distress in the workplace. So they used all these proven academic survey questions and applied it to our space. So kind of irrefutable way to ask the questions and then get the results. So they asked these questions. I think there were over 2,500 respondents, something like that, to the survey across all levels of the business. And on distress, so however they measured distress, but people are in distress, the on-site staff, 50% of respondents were in some form of distress. And the best was 44%. So it's high everywhere. No. And sea levels were at 46%.
That was super surprising to me.
It was, right? So now it's maybe different reasons, right? Because they're shareholder value and expense management and where's the revenue and how am I pricing units and am I filling up and am I building the right things? And that's the sea level kind of talk. And at the property level, it's the people. Are they paying their rent? How am I doing relative to my metrics on occupancy, vacancy, NOI targets, whatever.
I think it's probably higher with the on-site staff, because it's what you were talking about earlier. It's that everyday in your face stress.
Dealing with the public is not easy. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because it's kind of people like to trumpet bad news more than good news. They're going to come in and complain. They're not going to come in and just say, "Hey, I just love everything about this place." I hope they do.
Unless it's, Happy Property Managers Day in September.
Correct.
And you buy them a box of cookies or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was really interesting. And half of 50% among leasing professionals were in distress. And half of that 50%, so 25% of them were under severe distress.
That was crazy to me.
Right. And then the study went and looked at the effect on attendance. So it was kind of through two lenses: absenteeism and presenteeism. So absenteeism is easy. I don't come to work today. Presenteeism is I come to work, but I'm really not present.
Right.
I'm not mentally there. And they put some dollar values on these things. A couple other stats here. Let's see. So people miss a day a month due to mental health. A day of work a month due to mental health. So 1 in 20 days. So 5%. So they're already understaffed, so they're stressed. Then they miss a day. Their colleagues have to pick up the slack, so they get more stressed. So it's kind of this vicious cycle to some degree. What was really interesting was they asked the cohort of people that said I was severely distressed, or they asked them how well they think they perform.
The disparity was really
so
shocking.
The severely distressed people think they're giving 115%,
and they're not.
And they're only giving 66% as measured productivity. So like, they think they're doing a really good job, but in fact,
their performance
is low. Now, a little bit of good news. Compared to 6 months ago, it did increase. The feeling good about things increased by like a couple points. So
like the feeling of optimism.
Yeah,
like things
increased a little bit. But on a scale of 1 to 10, we went from 6.6 to 6.9. So we're like a C minus instead of a D plus.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Now, there was a question that was really interesting in the session yesterday. I went over this. You can ask people one question. Do you feel hopeful? That simple question. And 80% feel hopeful. So even if you're having a bad time, if you feel hopeful, that's a positive indicator for your outlook, right?
So are they hopeful that things are going to improve? Like, what are they hopeful about?
They're just hopeful.
In general?
In general. Okay. And of the 20% that weren't hopeful, 1/3 of them were well, and 2/3 were in distress.
So there's a clear correlation between
you're in distress,
feeling of optimism,
and how you have that kind of negative feel, like, and that's that downward kind of like, again, I'm an eternal optimist, so I can't get there. It's really hard for me to get there.
When you were looking at all levels of the organization, from CEO to the on-site people, one thing that I found really interesting was that even though they asked a specific question about trauma, had you experienced like a traumatic experience at the workplace or something like that, and CEOs had a very high level, and yet they somehow were able to find the right resources, or knew that they had access to the right resources to deal with the workplace stressors and trauma, whereas the people on the lower end at the beginning of their career, maybe 3 years in or something like that, did not feel empowered to find those resources,
or didn't know they existed. So definitely a problem. I think that partially goes to the turnover problem. Right, because who reads the employee handbook? Right? Like, it's in there. There's an EAP number in your benefit packet that you're worried about my deductible and my health care, and I really wasn't worried about EAP. So and then but then to actively go get help, I think, is another thing, right? When you're maybe a bit more older, more mature, maybe it's easier to ask for help than when you're younger. At least that's from my cohort of the
for sure,
the Gen Xers of the world. But there is a high degree of workplace trauma in our space, and it is kind of, like, it's easy to see, right? Like, people, and I think we've gotten less tolerant as consumers. We tend to pop off a little more when things don't go our way, right? And then you throw on that social media and reviews and all those things, and there's so many outlets for negative content. That then if you consume that, right, it's why some athletes, they get off of social media, because like they don't need the noise. Like, they can't change any of that. They can just focus on what they can control.
For sure.
Right. Other couple things from this study. So the cost of presenteeism and absenteeism is $3,000 per person per month. So I was thinking about this. That's $36,000 per person per year.
Wow.
So that could be, half to a third of a person. And what if you let people take one mental health day a month? It's less expensive.
For sure. So companies, like, it is in their interest to start taking
to recognize this.
Address this.
But the workload is also a problem. Like, if you look at the study, a lot of folks still feel overworked. They're understaffed. The expectations don't go down, right? Because there's someone quit, like, the property has to run. There's people moving in. There's people moving out. There's
things are still
bills
breaking.
to be collected, their toilets still need fixing, right? Like all that stuff. The other thing they did share that $1 invested in mental health yields $4 in return. So
Wow.
I found that really kind of fascinating. So instead of losing $3,000, like, well, how much if we invested $3,000? We've gained, $12,000.
Yeah.
So, so I think there's compelling evidence, and we hope that more and more organizations take part in this survey as time goes forward, because if you do it as an organization, you can get your cut of the data, so you can see what your organization said and how you compare to the averages of everybody. There were a number of people in the room yesterday who were actively listening to this conversation, whose organizations did not participate in the study. So the more voices we get in there, the more clarity we'll have in the data. But more importantly, the more clarity you can have as an organization for yourself.
Yeah. What sort of tools does NAA, the National Apartment Association, offer to organizations that want to start actively addressing these things?
I don't know if I can drain this list completely, but so I've been on the operations committee, and there's a mental health subcommittee from NAA, and they do have a number of resources, policy guides, and mental health first aid training that is available. So as an organization, just take advantage of what the NAA is providing, because you can raise awareness internally. And again, the more you do raise awareness and people feel more confident and more comfortable, the more productive they'll be. I got to applaud one of the people on that committee who spoke at the session yesterday and talked about how in a room full of, 400 or 500 people, she talked about how she tried to take her life twice.
Wow.
You talk about a powerful moment, for someone to bare their soul like that.
Yeah.
All for better visibility, understanding. Let's talk about it. It's okay to talk about it. And she had on a sleeveless dress.
Yeah.
And you could see her tattoos, and her tattoos all were connected to her mental health journey.
That's incredible.
And so she told us about those things, and wow, blew me away. Absolutely. Yeah.
How did she go about getting the help that she needed? What turned it around for her?
I don't know if she shared that bit, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I think like anything, when you have an issue, the first challenge is understanding you have an issue.
Yes.
And then you have to want to get help. I can talk about this from a weight perspective. I can be overweight and be happy.
Yeah.
And at some point, maybe I'm overweight and I need to do something about it. But my wife can't yell at me into losing weight. She can't motivate me enough to do it. I have to want it.
Yeah.
Right? It has to come from me. We all know that with our kids. You can tell your kids what you think they should do, and they're not going to listen to you. They'll figure it out. And when it becomes their decision, then it's good.
We just have to bump our heads if we do.
It's the same thing here. Recognizing I have a problem, knowing that there are resources available to me, and then taking advantage of them, and not being put at risk for doing so.
Yeah.
Right.
So in your, I guess, in the panel session, did they discuss any remedies that programs companies should be implementing right now, or even talk about some of the things that maybe MRI has done, or even other companies that you've worked for in your...
I think the biggest thing that I took yesterday was this encouragement of physical health and mental health being treated the same.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to explain myself why I missed work yesterday and feel bad about saying it was a mental health day. I needed a break. And allowing for that. I think, we do a good job with our PTO policy, our holiday policy, our flex at MRI, our kind of flexible work. People have more control over their life. Now, there are times they do need to be in the office because that's what the job demands.
Yep.
But we have programs to let them be at home when they need to be at home, and volunteer in the community. And, I think we do a really good job in our most recent culture survey. The things where we scored the best were all culture-based.
Yes.
It was really fascinating, really pleasing to see all this time we spend as a company on all these things, DEIB, our reach out and represent our ROAR program, getting out in the communities, making a difference, our MRI Foundation, where we try to raise money for housing and STEM education, all those things rated super highly. And you know what the things that didn't rate super highly? Every company has the same complaint list. Pay me more and work me less, right? Like, I don't want to belittle it, right? But like, you find me an employee survey that doesn't say I should get paid more and I'm overworked. Like,
I mean, it's there every time.
It's there every time. Yeah.
You're right, though. It was the belonging section of the survey that really
popped.
Yeah. So people, I think one of the questions often is like, MRI allows me to make a difference or something like that. Something in that phrase. And people do feel like that as a result of the foundation, and like you were saying, the volunteerism activities and these, employee resource groups. We call them Pride resource groups, where people get to start, groups within the organization that they feel represent them and that address the issues that they care about.
Right. That's those kind of communities within the workplace. So I think that's, and we provide time and space for that to happen.
Yeah. Right. And your managers do not discourage you from participating in those events. It's actually encouraged.
Yeah. So I think that paid off in this survey.
For sure.
Right. Which then pays off for us as a company.
Yeah.
Happier, more productive employees.
All right, BZ, I've got one final question for you. So we have the Voice of the Property Manager survey that we started putting out a few years ago. How can people participate in that? Also, do you think we'll uncover some of the same trends that we uncovered in the mental health and wellness report?
So I think that's run through NAA. So that survey will be made available, I think, in the fall, September, I think the time frame is. We're actually careful not to overlap these two too much.
Yeah.
But there are clearly themes, right? Because we asked things in that survey about, do you plan to be in the industry in 2 years? Right? And am I overworked? And so, there's a lot of kind of potentially some cause and effect you could kind of draw by looking at those results and then these results. And you could see where people might get in distress because of the situations they're dealing with on site every day. And getting the voice of the property manager is super important, right? The people on the ground make this industry go.
Yeah.
Right? So they need training, they need support, they need resources, and it's always enlightening to kind of hear it straight from them.
And, in celebration of property managers, MRI created Property Managers Day a few years ago. That's right. National Property Managers Day. A few years ago. To just sort of celebrate property managers, as we saw from this survey, they're one of the most, they seem to be one of the most stressed, people in this industry. And so it's important that we show them some love. And we'll be doing that again in September.
Yeah, it's great. I know one of the folks we work with, one of our PR contractors, she takes donuts to her property staff. I know folks, we do it. Folks on
I took pie teams. Because I'm a Southern man. I took pie.
Okay, what kind of pie?
I bought them apple pie. Of course, I had to do apple pie. Then I bought them chocolate pecan pie, and it was a lemon pie as well. Okay. Oh, and I bought one buttermilk too. I went to the buttermilk sky pie shop. I forget what it's called. It's my first time eating there.
It's great, and I think this is slowly picking up steam in the industry.
Yeah.
Right. I think in the first year we didn't have a lot, but like it's. The number of people that recognize this day and take advantage of this day is growing year over year, which is great.
Yeah.
Right? Because it is a very underappreciated, taken for granted role, especially from resident to property manager.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's great that we give folks an opportunity to say thank you to all those folks. Yeah.
Well, BZ, thank you so much. Speaking of saying thank you so much for being here with me today.
Sure.
This is a super interesting subject to me. And to all you people out there, let's show some love. People are going through it. So let's show kindness. Let's show some love.
The NAA, compartmentalize. What's the slogan for the conference?
Oh, because we're in the city of love, Philadelphia.
Feel the love.
Feel the love. That's right.
Brotherly love.
Brotherly love.
Love's all over the place.
It is.
I'm going to get up and hug you.
You know I'm a hugger. Don't play with me.